Candace Owens is just doing her thing, and she has gone even further down the COVID-19 conspiracy wormhole than I've seen some of them, her colleagues at the Daily Wire do at this point. Let's take a listen to what she has to say about COVID and communism.
We obviously know the reason that they're running point on this is because they don't want Americans to connect the dots. Because we're at the beginning of this horror show, right? At the beginning where they come and they say it's going to be great. Everyone, we're going to band together. We're going to take from the rich people and you're going to have more. And they are in Cuba at the end of this nightmare and realizing that actually, no, it was just their government growing themselves, empowering themselves, and removing power from the people. These people are starving and they're in the streets. And I want to get to actually Twitter, because this shocked me when I saw the banner. Everybody in the world knows this is about them protesting against communism. And look at Twitter's headline. The protests take place across Cuba as country faces shortages of COVID-19 vaccines. This is a protest about COVID. You know what? I'm going to agree with them. This is a protest against COVID-19 because COVID-19 is nothing but a big cover for communist rule hitting the shores of the West. You are masking our children. You are pretending it's because of COVID-19. You are radically changing the way that we vote in this country. You're pretending it's because of COVID-19. All of this stuff is actually the democratic socialists, aka the communists, coming together to bring communism to the American shore.
Absolutely, and it's exactly what they did before they consolidated power and Fidel finally admitted he was a communist. In fact, you look at their propaganda they put out back then, you could interchange that with the actual materials from Democratic candidates today. We're not communist, we're humanist, we're pro-justice for all, we want healthcare for all, we want education for all. They wanted indoctrination in schools for all, they wanted division of race for all. They wanted to go door to door.
Candace, that's the name of her show. I like how it's like in the vein of some sort of The View. It kind of looks like that, or
Oprah, yeah.
Right. Where's the show on? Is this on like The Blaze or something?
Daily Wire.
Yeah, the big O for Owens, but the show's called Candace, so maybe just make it about that. So I am confused about this argument here. She passionately talks about how the protests in Cuba are about communism. And then it takes quite a turn that COVID-19 in and of itself is a plot to bring communism to the shores of the West. So can you guys help me piece this together here? I'm not exactly sure how she made that initial leap and how masking has anything to do with communism either.
Just like they think any sort of climate change addressing is an attack on capitalism, because fundamentally it is. It's pointing out that capitalism actually can address this problem, and we need major government action to do and collective action to do so.
I mean, to me, it shows. No, go ahead.
I think it's a symbolic thing. Like, you know, the mask is like a muzzle, and it's preventing you from like engaging in capitalist exchange by being, you know, the stores are closed, all that other stuff. You know, in my opinion, though, it seems as though even in countries that are not communist, they've been able to deal with it a little bit better than America. So I don't know why America is so uniquely weak to this, you know, communism filling the lungs of its inhabitants. But, you know, they should probably work on that. Maybe like start spraying vitamin C in those chemtrails instead of just, you know, I don't know, benzene.
Right. This is what happens though when the right has to cover or talk about something that doesn't fit so neatly into their U.S. American centric right-wing talking points, right? I mean, elsewhere in the world, I mean, I'm sure there's conspiracy theorists, but it doesn't appear like the vaccines are as tied to being a right-winger as it is, at least in like the US and in the UK. So they're utterly confused how to frame the idea that these protests could possibly actually have to do with the COVID vaccine, that shines a light on the COVID vaccine that seems positive. You know what I mean? Like, why would people want the COVID vaccine, especially if they're anti, you know, they're anti the leftist regime there in Cuba or anywhere else in the world where these sort of things have been happening. You know, nope. It just doesn't fit into their worldview, so they can't possibly understand it. So to them, oh, this has got to be some like sort of like, a rabbit being pulled out of a hat to try to confuse people.
Well, I'm sure in Candace's mind, and she can't acknowledge this because there's no mention in that clip of the embargo, blaming what's going on in Cuba on the lack of vaccines, on the lack of certain resources would necessarily bring America into the conversation in a negative way because, and it's hard to, rather it's hard to overstate this. America is very unique in the world in the way it views Cuba as this kind of, backwards communist threat still 60 years later after, it began as that way, right? And so, I brought this up before in the show a while back, but if you watch something like The Amazing Race Australia, they'll just go to Cuba. Like, one of the legs on the trip is just going to Cuba. Everyone has a good time. They talk about how, the cars are nice, how there's like this mix of like older and newer cultures. They have the same kind of things to say about Cuba as they would about any other, Bahamians, Caribbean style island. Only in America, and I guess our closest allies, do you see such this backwards notion about what Cuba is, because, if you actually wanted to make comparisons between like Cuba and the way countries that have had our intervention in that region have fared, like Jamaica, like, Haiti, you can see such this stark difference between, just quality of living. She talks about the communists trying to indoctrinate kids in schools after they came to power. Cuba had one of the most effective literacy programs in the entire world after communists took office. I forget what amazing percentage they increased literacy by. Probably better than we do, or better than we care to do. But continuing this long war with Cuba is one of the only ways, along with drawing on World War II nostalgia, that America can keep that kind of shining beacon on the hill, where the good cops of the world thing going. Not only just for the rest of the world who doesn't believe it, but for their own citizens. Like, it's a very ideologically motivated position that seems very natural in America, but it's very, I think, if you just go to Canada, go any other like English speaking country, they don't treat Cuba that way. And it's a very sharp example of how radical American ideology is, I think, geopolitically speaking.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.